dyslexic, so I'll correct it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. That was way too perky for as early in the morning as it is for homeschool families. I am so sorry. I apologize. We are excited to be here today to talk to you live about homeschooling multiple kids at one time. That's definitely one of the most frequently asked questions is how do I do this when I have a big kid and little kids? So if you haven't met me, my name is Erin Wainwright. I am an admin for Alabama Home Educators and also South Alabama Homeschooling down in Mobile, Alabama. I have 3 kids of my own, which doesn't sound as impressive as some of our homeschool families. But at one point, I also kept my nephews and I had 5 at home. So I had them from high school down to infant, and we had to learn how to juggle all of those things. So Devin, we're going to just go across the board. We got Devin in the middle and then Courtni on the end, so we're just going to go across. Devin, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Devin Basco. I live down in Mobile. I run professional home educator. Sorry, I don't know where my mind went. Professional home educator, a group that you can get free workshops and all sorts of stuff in. And I've just been around forever. I've got 5 kids. We've homeschooled all the time for over 15 years. So we've been around for a while.
And Courtni?
Courtni Sedlacek, up here in North Alabama area. I've been homeschooling. This is my 12th year, going on my 12th year homeschooling. 3 kids, spread out. And I just launched a new website, brand spanking new. So be patient with me, people. It's HuntsvilleHomeschoolGuide.com to help homeschoolers in our area figure out how to get started.
Awesome. Yep, she's got a ton of resources. So Courtni is going to have to dip out on us at about the 30-minute mark. She's got busy homeschool mom things to do. So if you see her sort of disappear, that's where she's going, but she's going to talk to us until she has to run. So when I was homeschooling multiple age groups, I had 2 in high school. I had 1 in elementary school, and I had a toddler. I think he was about 3. And then I had an infant. He was still in the baby carrier, and so it was definitely hard to come up with how to get everything done when the littles are wanting to be up you, and the high schoolers were pretty self-sufficient at that point. That's kind of, I guess, the goal is you want them to be self-sufficient, so you get them to that point. By that point, they were pretty self-sufficient, but the elementary schoolers still needed a lot of my help. So, Devin, how old are your kids spaced apart?
Mine, let's see. 19, almost 19, 16, 14, 11, and 4.
It wasn't a trick question, Devin.
Like, how old? Yeah, look, there's multiples. I don't know how old they are. Some days I don't know their names.
Well, I didn't ask you for birthdays, so that's good, right?
Yeah, like, sometimes I don't even know what their names are.
All right, Courtni, what about you? What do you have at home?
Well, I'm not as blessed, but I just have 3. One's almost 16, one's 10, one's 7. And the ability range is greatly different between the 10-year-old and the 7-year-old. So normally you can kind of do those together.
You can't.
Not in this house. Not in this house.
Well, that's good. And that's definitely something that we want to talk about, what you can do together and what you can't do together. And how is that? So I guess my first question is, how do you juggle everyone's school getting done in a day? Let's start with Devin.
I usually, for me, well, I mean, you look at 2 ways. When my first 4 were very young, you combine everything you can. Now, when they get older, like you hit high schoolers, it's not quite so easy. You can't. The thing that happens with high school is if you're combining them, you suddenly have a 16-year-old who can graduate like at 15. That's a little scary. So you have to kind of, it is, isn't it? You've been there. I know you had the same kind of thing. Your 2 girls, Erin's 2 girls graduated together. So you have to kind of juggle that and have a plan if you're not ready to graduate anybody. But I definitely always plan for everybody, even when the baby was only a baby, like newborn. Everybody had school, and we all planned.
What about you, Courtni?
Well, okay, so remind me of the question.
How do you juggle getting everyone's school done in a day?
Oh,
How do you
yes,
juggle?
yes. Okay, so really, I'm not as anal as a parent when it comes to schooling as I know a lot of people come into homeschooling with. And so what we do is in the younger ages, we don't hit all subjects. It's the 3 R's. I'm gonna sound like a homeschooler. Read, write, arithmetic. Arithmetic is something. But we hit those three. Those are our three hardcore subjects up until about 4th, 5th grade. If they can read, they can write, they can do math, they can do anything. And so that's one thing. The other thing is I am not concerned at all about how much work we necessarily get done in a day. I let them work until they like, I mean, all our kids have that attention span. We can see that light that turns off and on in them. So when the light turns off, we're done. And I've done it that way. I've been accused of not being structured enough because of that, but we've never not completed our work in that capacity. So there's never a strain on me to get it done. It'll get done. Does that make sense?
No. I definitely agree with that. I definitely think that that's something, especially new homeschoolers. And I know we're going to have quite the influx of that this year. I remember the first year I homeschooled and I just had the 3. I made my little classroom and we were going to sit down every day and we were going to do it from here to here. And I had my
4 years.
Yes.
And we never used the room. Like
we never use it now. Right?
We bought desks and we never used them.
The stuff on the walls.
They're junk areas.
Classroom.
Yeah. So I definitely know what it's like. I remember what it was like to try and be, no. You have to get everything done in a day. And I definitely agree with you. The flexibility and the understanding that, it'll get done. I know that there are some people who do only 4 days of school a week all the time. Like that's their schedule. Something we do is we school year round. So, because people ask me all the time how we do it all, because we do a lot of field trips. We're field trip, but I'm very much invested in hands-on learning. Can I take you somewhere where you can see the history in real life, where you can see the science with your hands? Yeah.
And that's the other thing. The concept that field trip means no work.
Yeah.
Like when you're on this field trip, regardless of where we're going, as Erin, you did the other day, we're going to pick blueberries. That's a lesson on so many different things. How a business is ran, how blueberries grow. I mean, it's a bunch of things. So to say, well, we went on all these field trips, how you get all your schoolwork done. The field trip is education, and we have to break this thing of, well, if they're not doing the book work, then they didn't get their schoolwork done. And that is just the farthest from the truth. It used to be that we didn't have to go to college and do all this studying to get our education. We would do hands-on training. We would go on a job and we would work that job and people would teach us on the job, but somehow that hasn't translated into education. It's the same thing. Even if I'm playing all day, I guarantee you I learned something while I was on that field trip.
Absolutely. Hey, I just want to remind everybody watching, we're at a whopping 4 right now. It's too early. Everybody's like, no, I'll come and watch this when it's recorded later. If you're watching and you have questions, you can definitely ask, and I'm paying attention, so I'll get your questions asked of these lovely ladies. I'm going to ask Courtni first because I know we're on borrowed time with Courtni on this. But what are some of your tips and tricks? I think that's the number one thing people want to know. How do you keep those little kids from hanging on you and distracting you and doing this and keeping you from helping the older kids? What are some of the things you do?
Well, they're basically all independent now, right? So the number one is get the older kids independent as quick as possible. And that is very doable for a 4th or 5th grader to be independent. My 4th grader definitely does most of his work by himself. He only comes to me for questions. So that's the first tip. Older kids, get them as independent as quickly as possible. And then for the younger ones, something I used to do is just give them something to do. and use the time that I have, as we talked about me being on borrowed time, but I feel like when we have younger children, we're on borrowed time. So the time that we know that they will be most distracted with shaving cream, with a sand table, with a water thing, and even, I know we hate this, but even sometimes media, learning media, educational media, use that time to really go dig in deep with the kid that needs help in this subject. So for a while we were using the curriculum sequential spelling. You just can't do sequential spelling without mom unless you buy the DVD. And so you can either buy the DVD or, the youngers have this thing to do, and we're going to jump in to do sequential spelling, and we're going to make use of that time before the younger no longer wants to do anything. But that's usually, that is like my key. And that was the way I managed to get through it. Just number one, condense what you have to do, because if you're doing 5 or 6 subjects and you got little ones, then that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Number two, the subject that needs the most help, that's when you occupy the younger one with whatever that thing is that they like to do. Every so often I have what I call my community babies, and this babies that I bring in to help a mom do whatever. And we have this one in particular that's with us a lot, and he's 3. So while Macy was doing, my 7-year-old was practicing her handwriting, I gave him a big pan of shaving cream for him to play in. That gave me about 30 minutes because he was like mesmerized by the mess. And shaving cream is an easy mess to clean up, and we're done. But that's what I'm saying. So if I'm only doing 3 subjects with my 7-year-old, and then the thing that really takes my attention, I can give them that activity that allows them to get occupied, and I can just hone in, super focused right then we're good. But also remember that they're not going to go to college not knowing how to read or write. They're not going to finish elementary school not knowing how to read or write. They will pick it up. And so if you take a little bit of time, if you can only get 30 minutes a day, it's going to work out. I know that sounds crazy. It's going to go viral, and it's going to be totally bad for homeschoolers. Like, look what homeschoolers, they're gonna post this video on that Harvard article.
Yeah. They're gonna find us and do it. No, I think you found your people, because I know how Devin does, and I definitely think the same way. I'm going to throw out there, definitely kind of tagging along with what you're saying. Man, I use those nap times. Before we had babies, with my older son, we did least favorite subject first down to most favorite, because the least favorite subject was going to take forever. And so we did that first so we could get it knocked out of the way. But once I had the babies, well, I had to do, we were very project-based in our history and science, and I had to do, my hands were needed for that, whereas my hands weren't needed for him to write spelling words or him to, do that kind of stuff. And so we definitely switched to a more, this is what you don't need my hands for. I could, if I have to, I can put a baby on my hip and you can do this subject. But for these subjects where you need my hands, we'll do that when the baby takes a nap. Then when the baby doesn't take a nap anymore, then you have to switch up the game plan. But until then, those went for nap time. But Devin, what are some of your tips and tricks?
I always planned for all kids, even the baby. There was always school toys or school activities. I mean, books at Walmart are cheap. Costco, Sam's, wherever, they're cheap. You can buy them. So I always had things for them to do. High chairs are your friends. Don't get rid of them. You can put that toddler in a high chair and they're caught. They can't go climb the bookshelf because they're there and they're doing school. Learning apps. We have an iPad for Alicia. She's almost 5 now, but she has a little iPad that has just learning apps on it. So nothing else is there. She can't even find how to get on the internet there because that's been hid. But we had morning binders. So I had everything set up when I had 4 and my first 4 are all really close together in age and they're all together. And so when they were little, I would have a morning binder so Cole could grab and start his handwriting, start school. And he didn't have like 10 books to look at. It was just one binder. So everything was combined. And then Elicia, he was starting high school when Elicia was born. And that's where you have to watch it because, high schoolers are independent, but they can also get tricky sometimes too. So double check their work in the evening, even if they are, because sometimes they game instead of doing math. And Cole got 45 days behind in math, and that was the year so things happen. So yeah, always double check their work especially when you have a baby, because that's my trick. Double check.
Yeah, and definitely even with good kids, because I'm like, Cole is his
he's a
sweetest
good
kid.
He
And
is
I
a
had
good
two very
kid. He's
good
not
kids.
bad. He's not a baddie, but he got behind in math because he was gaming. But all my kids now are independent except for Elicia, and we made a checklist. And in the beginning, they actually now they pick when they do it. They have all week to complete work. But in the beginning, when I start that, it works really good. But when you start, you check every night, and then so you begin to learn your kids which ones you have to continue that. And I have 2 that I have to continue to check every night, and then I have 2 that can go all week long, and I know they're going to stay on track. So.
I'm a big checklist fan. I got that from Devin, and we started doing that with my son and my girls was to and you can kind of do that as your kid does. You can do it a daily checklist. Devin, I know, does it for the week. They have, as long as they get it completed by the week, they're done. Mine is every day. He has to get his done because I've met my kid. And so if he doesn't have to finish it every day, which, things happen and sometimes he doesn't. And sometimes, you're definitely flexible.
Yeah,
I
always have
freak out if he doesn't finish. But
I make notes when we're going out of the house so they know ahead of time. They can juggle their work. But it's like being in a work week. If you're at a job, you're not given usually stuff to do every day. You're given projects. So I think of it as projects. And it was very hard in the beginning. I had to let go. I was very anal, and it stressed me out to no end when I started doing that. But I've learned the benefit because most of mine will juggle their time now. And even this summer, I've tried to tell them several times, let's go to summer schedule and stop doing this. I'm tired. We've had quarantine and this, that, and other. And no, they're still doing their work.
Well, I work with the local university for some different projects and things. And so I see the professors all the time. I'm running into them on campus. And the number one thing they say about homeschoolers is how great that they do with independent work, how well they work independently. And this is kind of ingrained in them at this point. So this one's kind of the other thing. The second really big thing that homeschooling multiples get is how do you deal with all day, everyday meals? How do you, Courtni, I'm going to throw that one at you first because we're running out of time with you. But as far as, you have a ton of kids, how do you budget for a full week of a bunch of kids at home? I know mine want to eat constantly all day. Is there something you've put in place to kind of help that?
Oh.
She's going to school us now. She's going to tell us how it's done.
Okay, so obvious. I kind of think this is common sense. You shop on sales, and you make your menu based on what's on sale. And then I'm a Costco fan in some areas, so there's some things you just cannot beat the prices at Costco. And so, I have a membership at Costco, and I go there. But one of the main things I do outside of budgeting is I only cook one meal a day, and that's dinner is at lunchtime. And I know a lot of people won't agree with that because, my husband's a firefighter, and so this kind of got started when he was working 24 and off 48, so he's home 2 days a week. So dinner at lunchtime wasn't that big of a deal, but I only cook at lunch. I cook a big dinner at lunch, and then that's all the cooking I do for the day. They are responsible for their own breakfast, their own dinner. And I have things in place for them to cook themselves. Now, that depends on how comfortable you are with your kids cooking. My kids started cooking at 5, kind of before that, with the eggs and the pancakes and the things of that nature. So the oatmeals, even taught them how to make instant oatmeal, not without buying the packs of it. You just buy the quick oats and put all your ingredients in. And so I did that. But as far as the budgeting part, I don't buy a lot of processed foods. like box foods. I buy foods that are as close to nature as possible, and I buy off of sales and Costco. Those are my two tricks.
Do you separate things out and do can they only eat at certain times? Is that something that you do or anything like that?
My kid's stomach have a clock. So they wake up and they cook their breakfast. We have chickens, and so we always have an abundance of eggs. And like this morning, my oldest made herself a breakfast quesadilla. Another one got cereal. Another one did something else. I don't know, but those are the things that I don't like. So they eat breakfast when they wake up. Lunch is around 11:30, so they're looking for me around 11:30, and usually there's a meal there. And in the evening, whenever they're hungry. Now, I don't allow for a whole lot of snacking because you need to eat well at your meal. But I don't really police the kitchen. I don't know, and it always works out for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is probably because this is how it's been since they were 5 or 6, and so it just kind of moves up to training. So I'm sorry, I'm not much help in that department.
No, I love it. It's more of that, definitely, and I think sometimes with things like this, when you've done it a certain way, when you were raised to do it a certain way, I know I have this problem. I can't think beyond that. And then somebody will say something like the list thing that Devin had told me, make a checklist. And I went, well, duh, that's a great idea. So I think what you're saying maybe isn't as familiar to some people, but somebody out there might be going, wow, doing dinner at lunch, that might really work better for my family. And they just never, they never thought of that. So I think that's a really neat idea, especially for our families who have, I know down here we have a lot of shift work guys and things like that do with the what do you call it, shipyards and things. So, definitely, and it's got to be healthier not to be eating a heavy meal late at night. That's probably actually better for you not to be eating the big heavy meal right before you go to bed. But what about you, Devin? What do you have for
I'm similar. Most of my kids sleep 10 to 12 hours. That's just how they've always done. So they'll go like 10 to 10. And so when they get up, that's brunch. So they have brunch. They get their own whatever they want to get, leftovers, whatever they find. So they'll cook breakfast, and then we'll cook one meal around 2. I cook the main meal. It's in a big one because I usually make enough for leftovers so they can grab them later. So that's what we do. So really, two main meals, and then there's snacks. But now sometimes they act like I have no food in the house, but that's usually because they ate it.
I will say, let me just tell you, this is making me feel better because we usually, and this is definitely a perk of homeschooling, is getting to let them sleep and let them get their energy. And so we wake up a little bit later, and then by the time we're not get up and eat people. So by the time we get up and get started and do this and that and the other, we're not eating breakfast until, 11 o'clock. And then, we wait and then we eat dinner. And so I feel so much better. I just need to call that the plan instead of, oh crap, we haven't eaten breakfast yet at night.
When my kids were little, I would make like 200 to 300 muffins in a weekend and then freeze them. And so they would just grab muffins for breakfast because I am not a morning person. Mm-hmm. I like breakfast, but I don't want to get up and cook it. So I would like big batch make muffins and waffles and stuff, and then they would just grab them and get them whenever they woke up.
I used to do that too, but now you're old enough to do that mess yourself.
Yeah. Well, we don't eat a lot of wheat now. We don't eat a lot of wheat now. That's kind of changed. Our diet has changed. I used to have a grind. I still have a grinder, and I would grind flour and bake bread and all the stuff, but I don't eat that now. So I don't make it as much because I don't eat it.
Okay, real quick, before we lose there, I want to talk to you, Courtni, about what you were talking about earlier with the combining some of the classes. You were saying, I'll talk to Devin. I know Devin combines classes, so we'll talk to Devin definitely about that method. But you were saying with yours, sometimes that's not as easy because of the age differences. So talk to me a little bit about what you combine, what you don't combine, and why.
For like with my 7 and 10-year-old?
Yeah, or with all of your kids. Are there classes can you combine science with all of them in a way, or do you?
I don't combine science with the oldest. My oldest, the the almost 16-year-old, we outsource those. So she generally goes to class for science. But for the younger two, I just pick whatever I want to do, and they both do it. I teach up. So I always teach to the oldest level, and then the youngest always pick up. And I found that also to be true in different group classes that I taught. If you teach to the oldest, it always works out for the youngest. With also understanding that if you have hands-on activities for the oldest, then there's something for the youngest to do too. They might need a little more help, and generally the oldest is willing to assist in that. But that's generally how I do it. But to be honest with you guys,
this is being recorded.
This is going to be something else that the Harvard people is going to link down. I really don't have to do a lot of structured science for those younger two, because if I provide the materials in the house for them to do it, they tend to go in there and tackle it themselves. I don't have to direct. So we limit the amount of entertainment during the school day. There's a requirement that you go in and you have to do something that involves learning. And they always seem to skew towards science or social studies. So they're either trying to research whoever the guy on the Brave Wilderness YouTube channel, I forgot his name, but anyway, he does an animal every single YouTube. He has a show, and he does animal. He's like that one guy that got killed by the stingray.
Oh yeah,
forgot his name, but
he dressed up as him.
Huh?
My son dressed up as him, and Steve Irwin. He's like Steve Irwin.
He's like a younger version of Steve Irwin, and he goes and gets stung by all these different wasps and stuff.
I know who you're talking about. I don't remember his name, but yeah, he's a big thing in our house.
His YouTube channel is Brave Wilderness, so whenever they watch it, then they tend to deep dive more into whatever he's saying. Or, if I have the kit, I always have the materials for them to do anything they want to do. Vinegar is always on deck. Borax is always on deck. Baking soda is always on deck. Food coloring is always there. There's always some form of oil or flour, or I think at one point I had like iodine in the house because a lot of the experiments they were looking for had iodine in them. So I always make sure there's the materials that will be needed for a science project. Matter of fact, there is a science center here that does interactive science courses while we're in quarantine. And she gave me instructions of what we needed, and I had all the materials already because, that's just what I do. And so they typically just go in there and they have at it. I just make sure that the material that's needed is in front of them. Science books are around. Educational videos are around, and they typically go in and dive in themselves. This is getting long-winded, but another example of this is because we cut down on entertainment and outside time is a requirement, and I'm blessed to be on like an acre lot. My house is sitting on an acre. I mean, one year they went outside, all three of them, caught caterpillars, researched what type of caterpillar it was, and then created a habitat for that caterpillar and hatched the butterfly. And then they would release the butterfly after the butterfly was hatched. So the cool thing was they kept catching moths. And so when they would hatch a moth, they would be like, how did we miss it? And they would go and research what it was that they missed. Why did they think it was a caterpillar if it was actually a moth? That sort of thing. So that's what I mean by that. But the materials to do all of that and the permission to do all of that is understood. You don't even have to ask.
So is that just for science and history that you do that, or is it more? So those are the ones that combine really well. Do you find that math combines well, or language arts, or anything like that?
Not for my kids, because their abilities are so far apart. But once again, I got my 10-year-old independent about 2 years ago. And so he's able to go through the material, even the math material himself. He's only coming and asking questions if he doesn't understand what he needs to do. So I'm really technically only homeschooling one kid right now, even though I have three, because my oldest is independent. I just supervise it. My middle is independent. I just supervise that. And so the youngest one, I suspect is dyslexic. And so it requires a little more work for her. But she's the only one I'm doing. And once again, read, write, arithmetic. So we knock out reading, do the writing, do the math, and we're done with her. And the others are doing the work themselves. I'm just supervising.
Yeah, I definitely have found that with mine. I know my daughter got really into Hamilton right about the end of middle school. And I was like, oh, it's just a musical. I love musicals, so whatever, that's great. But she took it to a whole new level, and she dug in, and she can tell you what's factually wrong in Hamilton, where they deviated from the actual events to condense for the purpose of the thing. So I think there's a lot to be said for allowing them that freedom to kind of, and she to this day remembers all of that, where I don't remember many things from school.
My middle son he's really into cars, and his love for cars, he studies them. He knows what years he can look at them and say this and this and this. But that also ended up turning into a business. He just bought and sold his first car. Wow. So when you just let them just release, they're going to learn it. They're going to learn it. Just make sure they have the basics down, and they'll go in the direction they need to go. Yeah. I have to go, guys.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining us. You were wonderful. It was great. And we'll talk soon.
Miss Frizzle has to hop on her magic school bus.
We'll see you later, Courtni.
Yeah.
Bye. Anyway, she's fun.
She is. She's a lot of fun. So, okay, now it's on you. What do you combine and what do you not combine? And I see your question about 2- and 3-year-olds. We're going to get to that in just a minute, but go ahead.
I combine history and science is very easy. Electives, when they hit high school, is very easy to combine. I think language arts can be combined to a certain extent after they finish phonics, after they finish learning to read it. Now, that's a new one for me. I hadn't done that before, but I've started looking at it, and I'm like, I don't think it's so hard to combine it because, English, like that's, it's about the same every year. You might build on it, but I think you can combine that. Math, I don't think you can combine. Maybe games or, reinforcing concepts, but I don't know that you need to combine it. So
now,
you can finish.
Well, do you use I totally interrupted you. Do you use a curriculum? I know Courtni definitely went with the probably more unschooling-ish approach. Do you use a curriculum that you try and follow with them, or?
I should have one waking up. I know, but I'm on a video, baby. I have a baby waking up in my bed. But, this is my bedroom. So anyway, I'm horrible with history and science. I don't feel like I've ever really met one I loved. There are some that are easier to combine with, like Mystery of History is easier to combine. Even when my kids, when I had 2 groups, like I had middle school, elementary, and then I had high school or almost high school, I had 2 groups, and I would combine that, like everybody did chemistry the same year, even though their curriculum was not the same. Or they're doing the same history, even though it's not the same curriculum. Like we used Knotgrass for several years. The high schoolers had Knotgrass High School. The middle schoolers had their middle school. So they were doing the same subject, but not the same curriculum. So I would combine that way so that, with science, all the labs would be the same labs or similar enough to enjoy it with each other. But I've gotten a little wilder in my old age. Now I start thinking, language arts could probably be combined too.
That's awesome. Hold on, I pulled down my what do you get asked the most often for homeschooling multiples? I know you definitely get asked questions a lot. So
mostly it's how to handle when they're young. I think that is such a hard place to be when they're all little, and how to get everything covered. I don't always feel like mamas like what I say because I'm like, relax. You're going to cover everything. I mean, when they're little, drop the extras. History and science can be extra. You don't have, but hit math, hit phonics. And then once they get bigger, you can go back around to the science and the history and don't stress over it. But a lot of times when you're dealing with multiples, it's mamas with children being all close together in age, and they're usually young when I get asked.
Yeah, I know that I definitely, Courtni was talking about the learning resources having them available. So a rule in our house has always been that during school hours, for what that is. So school hours in our house are when you wake up till daddy gets home. When daddy gets home in our house, that's when school's over. My husband gets off work around 5 o'clock, so he's home around 5:30. So it's an extended schoolish day, but we don't do work that whole time. But during those hours, if you're going to watch any sort of media or anything like that,
we did not watch TV.
Learning. Well, ours has been learning.
TV. Well, when mine were little, there was not the Netflix. We didn't have access to Amazon when they were little. So, I mean, TV was not turned on during the day, because I found when you have TV on, just anything you want to watch, it's like their creativity slumped, and then they started bickering. So TV for fun, electronics for fun is not during the school day, but I am a little bit more lax if I think they're learning. The baby now, now the baby she's not a baby. She'll be 5 soon. I'm on live. They're starting to wake up. But somewhere I have the baby's iPad, and the only thing she has on there is her learning app. So we get
so I was amazed at the things my son learned. When you talk about not doing a specific set, curriculum for some things, I was amazed at the things he learned from Magic School Bus.
Magic School Bus. When your kids are little, in fact, that's going to be Lisi's science this year. We're going to buy her a kit.
Well, and teacherspayteachers.com, if you're not familiar with teacherspayteachers.com, definitely check out that website. They have a ton of free printables. They actually have a free curriculum that goes along with the Magic School Bus, the original series. And so it's kind of neat. It's set out in days, and it gives you some experiments if you want to try them and things like that, which would be really neat to kind of go along with Courtni's, because I know some people might be like, but how do you know what to have on hand? So that would kind of give you an idea to go buy those things, have them watch the Magic School Bus, and then if they want to do it, they would already have the supplies on hand. So I have somebody a Facebook user, who is asking, they have a 2 and a 3-year-old. So, excuse me, I will say this, my oldest 2 are a year and 2 weeks apart. So I've been there. I've definitely done that. And they did go to school from kindergarten through 6th grade. So, but for the ages of 2 and 3, 3 and 4, the year my oldest went to kindergarten was rough on my younger kids. But I don't, that's going to kind of depend on them too a little bit. But I know for me, Elizabeth, who's my younger one, was doing everything to keep up with the older kids. She just, it's kind of like Courtni said, they teach to the higher. And
and I agree with that.
Definitely.
You can definitely combine them easy.
So when we pulled them out of school, I went ahead and bumped my oldest up by a grade, and they graduated together without any problems whatsoever. She never struggled with any of the 1 grade higher things. So depending on what you're comfortable with, this is my advice, and then I'll let Devin say hers. But depending on what you are personally comfortable with, and keeping in mind this freedom that you have as a homeschool parent, if this is something you're definitely going to continue, I would just put them together at 2 and 3. They're so close in age. If a 2-year-old can keep up with a 3-year-old, especially once they get a little bit, about another year or 2 down the road, definitely just keep them going. Buy the same science, the same language arts, the same math. If she starts to struggle, you can absolutely pull her back and do, some different concepts. That way, homeschool kids generally don't know what grade they're in. So if you decide to pull up a younger curriculum, she probably won't even notice, or he probably won't even notice. So there's definitely that. I had a thought in my head and it just escaped me as I was talking. One of the greats, I'm not a big curriculum for those ages. We actually didn't buy our first curriculum until 1st grade. Definitely what Devin was saying, older, if you have those younger kids that you're trying to keep busy, the Dollar Tree, books from the Dollar Tree where they can just sort of work along and do things. The TV shows that are learning shows, the science experiments that they can just sort of play in. There's a couple of places called 3 Dinosaurs that does free printables that are great for manual dexterity, so they can practice holding a pencil and drawing a line from point A to point B. that's kind of a neat thing to practice. But if you're just like, man, I really want something to follow, some kind of curriculum, 5 in a row and before 5 in a row are some neat hands-on for that young age. And again, 2 and 3, they can do it together. You can do the books together. They have before 5 in a row is for the younger ages. And you can sort of start getting in that routine of kind of doing things. They should not be doing hours and hours and hours of school, definitely letting them up and run around. But at that age, you could definitely combine. And I think that's overarching of this whole, homeschooling multiple ages. That's probably one of the best pieces of advice I've seen that I feel like I've given. What you can combine and what you can do with them together is just definitely do. You can do that. You do not have to, I have a first grader, a third grader, an eighth grader, and an 11th grader. I have to have them each doing a curriculum that is assigned to their age group. There's definitely flexibility to be had there. So now I forgot what the question was. 2 and 3-year-olds, Devin.
2 and 3-year-olds. Yes, I think you can combine them. I think you just kind of have to make sure. I mean, the 2-year-old may or may not be ready for phonics, but I mean, you can do a lot of stuff together. And if they catch it, they catch it. If they don't, just in the next year, restart phonics for the younger one. You can, try it, but don't stress out if they don't. What I found with when they get older, when you combine them, that Juliana surprised me. I didn't realize that she had enough credits to graduate, and we were just going through one day, and then suddenly I realized that she has enough credits to graduate. So that was not on purpose, like Erin. That caught me by surprise. So if you decide to combine them all the way through high school, make sure you have a plan, because Juliana is not ready to graduate. She's decided that, not me. I gave her the choice. And so for the next year, she doesn't really have anything on my list to do, but she's going to do like a business intensive. So just, I know that's a ways in the future. So just be aware that when you do combine them, you might surprise yourself and suddenly they're ready to graduate. So make a plan in case they're not really ready to graduate. So.
Right. So definitely maturity levels and things like that. My 2, they're very, very similar. Their maturity levels are right there the same. They have the same group of friends. So it really worked out. I can't see who you are because it's only same Facebook user, but I've been where you are. So if you want to send me a private message to kind of discuss what I did and how I did it back then, you definitely can for more details. But yeah. And there's, busy boxes. Definitely. That's one thing we didn't mention here. I love busy boxes.
We always had school toys. That they only played with during school. I called it creative play. We would have an art box. We would have block box. We had sewing box, not with real needles, but, like the lace and card type stuff. So we always had activities that they could do. And when they got one board with one box, I'd put that up and pull out another box. And so we just kind of rotated it through their day.
Yeah, I think definitely.
Now they have, learning apps. So that was a whole nother level you can rotate.
Yeah, I think definitely having something that they can do. They generally want to do school, and you don't really want to squelch that. You don't really want to make it where you're like, no, you can't do that. Take advantage of it. I love what she said about the shaving cream. Another thing, shaving cream is great because it cleans up when you're done. Now, depending on your child, I know I had eaters. They like to put things in their mouth. So we used whipped cream, the whipped cream. So we used whipped cream and food color and things like that when they were little. But the shaving cream is great. One thing that was amazing for my nephew when he was about 3 years old, he loved paint the box. We have Amazon boxes like you wouldn't believe, and you just give him a paintbrush and a box and a pile of paint, and he would sit in the floor and he would paint that box for 45 minutes. And it would just keep him busy. So, and he was learning how to put the paint where he needed to put the paint, and things like that. But it kept him occupied. You may have to rearrange how your classroom looks. Like we were talking about earlier, we had these dedicated classrooms there for a little while, and then we realized that didn't work. I realized that before I had the little kids. And then once I brought in the little kids, I can't tell you how many times I've rearranged this house depending on where they were. So when the toddlers were, when they were little and they were moving around, but I didn't want them to leave this one room, well, then Justin had a dedicated space in the living room, and everything was kind of closed in and they couldn't get out. So everybody was in the same room. So I wasn't having to leave a room. Yeah. Then as he got bigger, well, I had the toddler who I kind of wanted to watch some media, you know, but I couldn't have him watching cartoons with the 7-year-old because the 7-year-old was just going to want to watch cartoons. So then I had to figure out how that was going to work. So I moved the 7-year-old to a room where I could kind of stand in a doorway and keep an eye on them both at the same time. So you may need to look at your house and go, okay, for this season, for this year and a half, we may have to rearrange what our house looks like for this. You know, we may have to definitely think outside of the box on that. What, you know, maybe we need to not be in this space. We need to be in that space. So yes, no, Devin?
Yes.
Devin said, yes, we're done. Well, that was great. I think we answered. Do we have any questions? If we have any questions, we were so great. We didn't even need questions. It was so good.
It might be 9 o'clock.
I think that's probably more what it is, that it's so early and everybody thinks we're crazy. Well, we are definitely, my next thing is, I think special needs. I think homeschooling special needs students is my next thing coming up. So definitely join us for that. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Courtni, for coming earlier. This will be recorded, and so that you can watch it later. And if you have questions at the end of this, if you're like, man, I wish I'd caught this live so I could have asked questions in real time, we are all in the group. So I'm going to tag each of us in this post, so that way we'll catch your questions if you ask them. But we're all in the group. So if you're like, she talked about this one thing and I want more details, definitely ask the questions and we'll all be there to answer. That's kind of what we do. So hi, Lori. How are you? All right. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming, and we really hope you got a lot out of it. We'll talk to you soon.